General Prelogar.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court. The First Amendment protects entities that curate, arrange, and present other people's words and images in expressive compilations. As this Court's cases has held, those principles cover newspaper editors, parade sponsors, and web designers. It also covers social media platforms. Those platforms shape and present collections of content on their websites, and that inherently expressive activity is protected by the First Amendment. That doesn't mean, though, that every business that transmits speech can claim First Amendment protection for that conduct. For example, telephone and delivery companies that carry speech from point A to point B aren't shielded by the First Amendment when they provide that service. But that's because they're not producing any expression of their own. It's not because there's some kind of common carrier or communications company exception to the First Amendment. None of this is to say that social media platforms are immune from government regulation, and governments at every level obviously have an important interest in facilitating communication and the free exchange of ideas. But in promoting that interest, governments have to stay within the bounds of the First Amendment, and these state laws, which restrict the speech of the platforms to enhance the relative voice of certain users, don't withstand constitutional scrutiny. I welcome the Court's questions.
Normally you are defending regulations, but are you, if the U.S. government did exactly what these petitioners, respondents are doing, would that be government speech?
So if I'm understanding the hypothetical correctly, Justice Thomas, if you're suggesting that the government itself would open a forum and allow users to post messages on that, I think that would implicate First Amendment principles because the government might be creating something like a public forum where it would itself be bound by the Constitution. I don't think that would all necessarily qualify as the government's own speech. The critical difference here, of course, is that these platforms are private parties. They're not bound by the First Amendment as an initial matter.
Mr. Clement said the difference is that if the government does it, it is censoring. If a private party does it, it is, content moderation. These euphemisms bypass me sometimes, but or elude me. Do you agree with that distinction?
Yes. I mean, the critical difference is that, as Justice Kavanaugh observed, the government's bound by the First Amendment. And so if it were to, for example, dictate what kind of speech has to appear and in what order, that could create a First Amendment violation. But here, it's the private platforms themselves that are making that expressive choice. And our recognition here is that they're creating their own expressive product in doing so. These are websites that are featuring text elements, speech elements, photos, videos, and the platforms, which are private parties not bound by the Constitution, are deciding how they want that to look, what content to put on it, and in what order. That's an inherently expressive activity.
What are they saying?
So it depends on the platform, the various value judgments that are embodied in its content moderation standards. I think there's a wide variety in the kind of content that the platforms deem objectionable, the kind of content they think might be harmful or will drive away users and advertisers. There's no one single message that each platform is conveying. But I guess if you wanted to look at the lowest common denominator, at the very least, it seems like their content moderation policies embody a judgment of this is material we think might be of interest to our users or that the users will find interesting and worthy of looking at. So it's a lot like the parade in Hurley in that circumstance, where the court specifically said, maybe you're lenient, you let a lot of content in, you can't identify a single discernible message from the parade as a whole, but there is still the baseline of the parade sponsor signaling this is something that's worthy of looking at in my parade.